Thank you for joining us here on the Global Travel Channel podcast show. I'm your host, Mark Philpott. I am back with another podcast episode, and I'm thrilled to have you all here with me. Whether you are a regular listener or whether you're joining us for the first time, welcome aboard, welcome back, whatever it might be. Got an exciting show ahead today, but before we get there, I just want to remind you all that we currently have the 2019-2020 Global Travel Channel Podcast Show Awards happening. Yes, you can vote for your favourite guest who's been on the show. All you've got to do is listen to some shows, go onto our website at www.globaltravelchannel.com and vote. That's right, the awards page is all there. All you've got to do is submit a vote. It's very easy. It takes you a couple of minutes, and you can vote for people in different categories. So if you've listened to one of the shows before, or perhaps today's guest blows you away with inspiration, motivation, or education, then head over and give them a vote. Okay, so today I continue the journey on interviewing people all across the world about their amazing travel experiences. And the lady that I'm about to speak to, well, she's been to more than 50 countries around the world, and we're going to give her a little bit of a quiz today on those countries and find out which ones changed her life. So it's a very warm welcome to the Global Travel Channel podcast show to Alex. Alex, welcome to the show today.
Oh, thank you so much, Mark.
So good to have you with me. How are you feeling today?
Not too bad. It could be worse. You know, it's it's a tough time, but it could be worse, definitely.
Yeah, that's a great way of looking at a positive attitude. Now, whereabouts in the world are you chatting to us from today?
I am in Brooklyn, New York.
Oh, beautiful New York City.
Yes, yep. I love it here, even in the worst of times. So I'd rather be here than anywhere else. So.
Isn't it such a magical place? There's no other place in the world like New York City.
It's true. And, you know, I grew up in Montana, in a small town in Montana. So if you had told me I would live in New York, which was so magical after watching so many movies and reading so many books, I wouldn't have believed you. We'll just say that.
And it's pretty much like that too, isn't it? You know, those movies you see and, you know, people swanning around in Central Park and all the other fantastic places in the city, and it's got an energy and a vibe about it that's just so unique.
It's true. It's really unlike any place I've been in the world, and you know, there are other cities that I've fallen in love with for different reasons. But New York, for some reason, has just really captured my imagination and kind of sustained it. Usually I keep wanting to travel and keep going different places, but New York is kind of the first place that has felt like home, for sure.
Is it a tough place to live? A lot of people say that, you know, it's a tough city to live in.
You know, I'm really lucky in the fact where I work from home and I have my own schedule. I think it can be a little bit more difficult when you're commuting. And I held a few office jobs in the city, and it was a lot more difficult then. But when you have the free time to explore and move about on your own schedule, then it is really as magical then as it seems like.
What's your one favorite place in New York City?
Oh, that's so hard. I love the Met Museum.
Yes.
I could spend years there, and actually, you know, really almost have. I go at least once or twice a year, and it's just a really magical spot for me. I remember watching When Harry Met Sally the first time, and when they were walking through the Met on their not date. And it was just, yeah, I was like, do they have places like that? That's amazing. I have to go. So
I love the way you say the first time. We've all watched it, I don't know how many times, that movie.
Oh, yes. And it was so funny. My husband, too, we were on a plane, and I forget where we were coming back from, but it was one of the plane movies that you could watch. And he had never seen it. And I said, you have to watch this movie. You're going to watch it 10 times after. And he loved it. He was like, this is one of the best movies I've ever seen. And I'm like, it took you a while, but now you know.
Was he sitting in his seat on the plane screaming out with laughter?
Yes, yes, he just kept giggling, and he has this big, like, laugh, too. So people were just looking around and saying, what is that guy laughing at? But I do, it's like a big, resounding laugh all throughout the plane, so.
Yeah, cool. Well, if you're out there in listening land today and you're sitting in New York City as well as Alex is, a big shout out to you all. Tough times, but you'll get through it like you always have, and yeah, the whole world's going to be a better place after this. Now, Alex, I ask my guests to dedicate their particular show to someone special in their life. So who would you like to dedicate your episode to today?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm going to dedicate this. I would dedicate it to a whole bunch of people, but I'm going to dedicate it to my brother and his fiance because I am not going to be able to make their wedding because of coronavirus. And they're getting married next month in June. And he and I are very close. So it is kind of a hard thing to not be able to be there. But yes, so all the best to them and their love. They're just both lovely people, and I'm so excited for them.
Beautiful. What's their names?
RJ, my brother Robert, and his to-be wife is Mallory.
Mallory and Robert. A huge dedication from Alex today to your wedding. Whereabouts are they getting married?
They're getting married in my hometown in Montana.
Montana. What a place to get married.
Yeah, that's actually where I got married as well. Yeah, in Glacier National Park. I grew up right there.
Oh my goodness. So you had all these massive scenery scenes in your wedding photographs, did you?
Yes, we did. We got married on Lake McDonald, which is the main lake there. So we had the mountains in the back, and we still had a little bit of snow on top of the mountains. So it was almost too pretty. It kind of doesn't look real. I'm kind of like, that doesn't look like it should be my wedding pictures, but it turned out really well. So.
Well, I'm sure they're going to have a fantastic time, and it is a shame that you're not going to be able to be there, but you are in spirit, and now you've dedicated your podcast show to them as well, which I'm sure they'll appreciate. So that's a little wedding gift from all of us, isn't it? This podcast.
Well, that's very sweet. What a great idea.
There we go. Well, thank you for that. And it's good that you talked about Montana, because we're going to dive into your childhood right now. And the first question I've got for you today is, what was your favorite book as a small kid?
Oh, that's such a great question. I am a big reader. I love to read. It was my way of traveling before I could travel. I love this book called Walk Two Moons by Sharon Creech. And I think I was 10 when I read it the first time, and I reread it again every now and then. But it's a road trip. It's a travel book about a young woman going to visit her mother in Idaho. And I remember just being obsessed with this book. It was so well written. It still is, in my opinion. And I remember on my family road trip when I went with my parents and my siblings, I remember reading it out loud to my sister in the car. And it was just so, we were so enraptured, both of us, by this book. And she was 8, so she had patience to listen to me read for miles and miles and miles. So it definitely wasn't my reading. It was the book for sure. So
aren't those road trips so special when you can reflect on memories like that?
They're so much fun. And again, I think, those memories are the ones that really shaped who I am today, my love of travel, my love of constantly learning. I think those are the defining moments for sure.
What town did you grow up in Montana?
I grew up in Kalispell.
Kalispell.
Yes, okay. It's about 30, a little bit more, 40 minutes from Glacier National Park.
Yeah.
And I lived there pretty much my whole life. I didn't actually really start traveling outside of the United States till I think I was 19, and I went to study abroad. But good times in Montana too.
So tell us, what was it like growing up as a kid there? Was it all about the outdoors lifestyle and just everything organic and clean, and people were friendly and inviting you over for cups of tea all the time? Was that the sort of place?
Definitely. And everyone is so kind and nice there. And it was so funny too, because My parents grew up with us being very outdoorsy. We would go hike, things like that. But I didn't really like it that much when I was a kid, quite honestly. I was the kind of kid that they had to yank out of the house and say, put that book down. Like, we're gonna go walk and we're gonna hike, pay attention to your surroundings. That I always had my mind off somewhere else. So I think my parents, they were just kind of like, you live in this beautiful place and you don't care, you're not paying attention. But now I love the outdoors. I kind of had to go away from that in order to appreciate it more. So yeah, it was so funny too, because it's a beautiful place and the people are beautiful, but I didn't really have the appreciation for it till I got older.
You've really gone from one extreme to the other, haven't you? From Montana to New York City. Like, there's not probably any more greater divide than those two.
It's true. And that was something when I made the decision to go to college. Was I said, how can I get as far away from Montana as I possibly can? So New York City, obviously, gotta go extremes. So that's what I did.
So do you think you'll go back to live in Montana one day?
A lot of people ask me that. I love to visit. My parents always love to have us. And we usually go back a few times a year. So I feel kind of as though I get the best of both worlds, where I get to visit when the weather is nice, because Montana can get pretty rough in the winter. It can get really cold. You don't get to do much. But at the same time, I can also come back to New York and experience that kind of life too. So I feel kind of like I've got a nice boundary, a nice balance of the two of them. But yeah, I probably won't go back to live in Montana just because I love New York so much, but definitely love visiting and try to get out there at least a few times a year. So
we're going to about 97 countries around the world today with a podcast, and a lot of people listening won't even know where Montana is in the United States. So do you want to give us all a little bit of a geographical lesson on the location of Montana?
Absolutely. And I always try to explain when I travel, and I said, oh, I'm from Montana originally. Everyone's like, where is that? It's close to Canada, on the north side of the United States, and then it's probably the closest city is Seattle. So I think we're about a 9-hour drive from Seattle.
9 hours, okay. So not too far away. And if you love skiing in the winter, then Montana is an exceptionally good place to go. It's a bit of a hidden secret, actually, when it comes to skiing, I think.
It's true. You're totally right. And, we get more and more people every year. It's pretty interesting because I do remember growing up and not seeing a lot of people come in. But because of Glacier and Yellowstone and the skiing and the hiking, we are starting to get a lot more tourists than we did a few years ago.
And a lot of them are international tourists?
Yes. Yep. A lot of people actually from Asia, which is interesting. Yeah. We've got people from all over the United States, some from Europe. I remember I was taking French lessons, and I went up with when my parents dragged me up to the park to hike, and I remember hearing French voices. I was 13 or something, and understanding what they were saying, and it was really surprising just to be in Montana and say, oh, I recognize that language. That's interesting. Yeah.
Bonjour, bonjour.
Bonjour.
Exactly. And on the flip side, if you're going to visit Montana in the summertime, then I would suggest it's one of the best places to do a motorbike tour or an RV trip, because there's so much beautiful roadway, and just scenery is breathtaking through Montana. It's
so true, and my husband is from here. He's from New York. And what we did a few years ago is we took a road trip through Montana, because he loves to travel as well. We're both big travelers. So we went to Banff first in Canada, and then we went through Yellowstone. We went through the whole western side of Montana. So we took, I want to say, about a week and went and did that. And he loved Yellowstone. He just had the time of his life in Yellowstone. And I was like, oh, man, you really like those bison, huh? And he's like, they're awesome. They're fantastic. So, but it's perfect for that. You're totally right.
Look, a lot of people, I think, when they visit the United States, they get sucked into those, San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, Chicago, those places. And America is so much more than those places. And when you get out into the real heartlands of the United States, there's some real magic there. And I've always said that the US has just as good a scenery as anywhere else in the world, really.
It's really true. And to be honest, the United States is probably the place I've traveled least out of, much of the world. So definitely it's something I want to do is just take a few months and road trip it and just, yeah, get an RV or a van or something like that and just really get to experience it because you're right. The in terms of natural beauty, I think it is pretty fantastic.
Yeah, cool. Look, we're going to talk a ton about travel today because that's what this show is about and it's one of your major passions. Can you remember your first overseas trip?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I'll never forget it. My first overseas trip was to Venice, Italy, and I studied abroad there for 3 months, and it completely changed my life. I was small town Montana girl, hadn't really traveled much except for road trips with family. I think we did one trip to Mexico. And it blew my mind. It was a whole new way of thinking. It was a whole new way of living life, whole new expectations of what, life and society could be like. And as soon as I did this, I became kind of addicted to that idea of saying there's so much I don't know and I don't understand. And it was kind of a fast track. I always say travel is kind of like the fast track of learning, where you can get a ton of information from books, you can get a ton of information from documentaries or movies, but if you really want to have an understanding of something, you go visit that place. And I just felt, I was learning on steroids. It was like reading one of my favorite books, but I was living in it. And that was a really special and unforgettable experience.
I like that, learning on steroids. I'm going to use that. So how did you score a gig in Venice, of all places?
It's so funny, too, because this was right before I went to college in New York. I had a book deal, so I didn't want to go off to school quite yet. So I was still in Montana, and our community college, our really tiny community college, had a study abroad program. And it was kind of the perfect thing because I had already fulfilled all my credits in order to transfer to a larger school. But I really had a lot of pressure on me to finish this book, and I was really young. And I just said, I kind of want to take a year and kind of just enjoy the process of getting this book edited and also do some travel, explore a little bit. It was kind of like a gap year, even though Americans don't have gap years. So that was great. And it was amazing experience for me. But yeah, I think, that was what was available at the time. And it's so funny too, because Venice is still one of my absolute favorite cities. So
if I was running the world, I would make it mandatory for all students to go on an overseas abroad exchange program of some kind.
I completely agree. I think it's such a defining moment in someone who is young, their life, and I agree. I just think that's really important.
Okay, so when I put my name up to run the world, you'll vote for me.
Oh, 100%. I'll go canvas. We've got this.
Do you remember the flight that you took from the US to Italy? Like, you must have gone to where? Milan, was it, where you went to?
Oh my gosh, where do we go? I think I went, because we were so far out in Montana, we went to Chicago, and then Chicago to Paris, and then Paris to Venice.
Ah, okay. So do you remember the flight? Do you remember how nervous you were and all the excitement that was going on and having your first overseas trip?
Oh, I was so nervous. And for someone who was so excited about the idea of travel and leaving, I hadn't really done it before. So the night before the flight, I was sitting on the kitchen floor and my parents were stepping around me and I was just crying. I was just sobbing and they were just like, you don't have to go, unless you really want to. And here I am crying, I really want to. And the flight was nerve-wracking. Once I get on the plane, I still have that anxiety before I travel every single time. Where, yeah, I do. And, at this point, I think I've been to over 50 countries. And so I still do every single time. But, when I'm packing my stuff, when we're about to go to the airport, I'm still nervous. For some reason, I'm like, well, I could just stay home. I don't really have to go. But as soon as I get on a plane, I'm fine, which is kind of funny. But
It sounds to me as though it's a fairly exciting kind of nervous. It's like anticipation more than I don't want to do this.
yes, exactly. And again, as soon as I'm on a plane, I'm so excited. That's the only emotion I'm feeling is excitement. But yeah, it's that initial, I think, making that transition and saying, okay, you're not in staying at home, sitting in your pajamas all day mode. You're into travel mode now. So
Now, not everybody gets to go to Venice for their first overseas trip. So, how was that particular destination exciting for you? What were a couple of things that you really remember about Venice?
I think the biggest thing I remember and what I love about the program that we were in is I got to experience a lot of Venice that was away from the typical tourist path. And because I was there 3 months, we had a lot of time to explore, a lot of time to. They put us in apartments in various areas of the city. We weren't all living together. So if we wanted to go see our friends, we had to cross to the other side of the city, which was really a great idea because we learned every twist and turn in Venice, which is crazy. It's the ultimate maze. And we were able to explore on our own, which was fantastic. And I think that's why it stuck out to me so much and still does, is because I really got to know it as a city and know it as a place. And even though I have lived in other places, for some reason, that aspect of saying, okay, I have to get to know this place, otherwise I'll get lost. It's kind of a psychological thing where I still feel as though if you drop me in Venice, I could probably find my way back to our old apartment. But yeah, I don't know why that was so impressionable compared to other places I've lived, but maybe it's because it was the first time. Maybe because it was so, the act was so physical of getting from place to place. I don't know, but or yeah, maybe first time being on my own. I think too, like learning to fend for myself on my own, cooking and things like that too.
Sounds to me like a combination of all of those things.
I think so. I think you're right.
Yeah.
Have you watched the movie The Italian Job?
Yes, yes. I didn't watch it till after though, and so it was kind of fun.
Do you reckon you could go back and organise a bank heist in the middle of Venice?
I don't see why not. I mean, if we can find my apartment, I think we can, take it a step farther and just do a bank heist as well.
How did that first travel experience kind of shape you as a person? What did you come away with? Did you have greater self-belief after that trip and all those sorts of things?
Definitely, I would say it gave me a lot more confidence, and it gave me a lot more insight into what I really wanted to do with my life. I had a very specific passion. I love to write. I loved writing. I always identified as a writer. But after I traveled and I lived abroad, I also realized, well, I'm a traveler as well. I, now can speak Italian. I have a lot of different things that I'm interested other than just this one specific thing. So I think, too, as my career, as my life kept going, I went down a different path. All those things sort of combined into what I'm doing now, which is, I love it. It's fantastic. But it did definitely change my perspective on myself and what I was capable of, too.
Where did the writing passion come from? Was there a role model in that area?
Honestly, there was, but I loved writing for as long as I can remember. When I was, I think, 4, my dad remembers coming home from work and I would say, Dad, I wrote a story for you. I wrote a story. And of course, they're, squiggles. I couldn't write. So they're just squiggles and illustrations on a page, but I would read it out loud to him. And I think it was just kind of an innate thing. I just really loved stories. And my mom loved reading to me growing up. Books have been very much a big part of my life for as long as I can remember. So writing seemed kind of a natural way to go from there. And yeah, it has just kind of followed me my whole life, which has been great.
Do you think growing up in Montana in those early years where you were spending a lot of time reading, do you think that's a fairly unique thing to that particular place? For instance, if you were growing up in New York City, you'd probably be out doing all sorts of different things and sitting at home reading books, right?
Definitely. And that's why it's kind of funny where we've been stuck inside, I think for about 2 months now, a little more. And it really doesn't bother me that badly because I can just pick up a book. And, that habit of reading has never died. I always have a ton of books going that I love to read, and I'm always, trying to learn something new. So I think that definitely was a big part of my childhood in saying there's not a lot to do here or not a lot to do here that I like growing up. So reading became my passion and my main interest. It was a way to experience something else and go somewhere else and empathize with someone else without actually having to leave where you were.
Yeah, understandable. So the trip to Venice, did it ignite your appetite for more travel?
Oh yes, 100%. As soon as I got back from Venice, I looked into how I was going to travel more. And I remember looking into just like this grand European tour for my graduation. And I paid for it myself with my book advance that I had. And I was so excited. And it went to several different countries over, I think it was like a month and a half. And I just mostly wanted to see as much as I possibly could, and then I could decide what I really liked and wanted to go back to. And but I really just wanted to get an idea of what Europe was like and get to know Europe more. So that was pretty immediate. As soon as I got back, I said, okay, as soon as I'm graduating college, which was another 2 years away, I was already planning my next trip, which I still do that. It's horrible. Sometimes even on a trip, I'm planning my next one.
Planning the next one. Are you a Gemini?
I'm not. I'm a Leo.
You're a Leo? Okay.
Oh, yeah, I always say I'm the worst Leo I know. So
That makes sense though. So yeah, always planning the next thing in advance.
yeah, and my husband's a Sag, so he's the same way. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, makes sense now. I've got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I'm going to read you something, and I'd like you to express to us the feelings around all that. Travel helped me battle an eating disorder.
Yes, it did. I was always very, I would say not necessarily a perfectionist when it came to my work and what I did, but definitely a perfectionist when it came to myself and self-control. And I grew up from a very young age. I was a ballerina for a long time. So that was a big part of my life. I was at the dance studio, I think, 4 or 5 days a week, depending. And it was a very big part of my life. And that is very much how can you look as perfect as possible. And then, as a teenage girl, too, you get all these messages of saying, okay, well, if you want to be loved and you want to be accepted, you have to be very thin. You have to diet, you have to do this and you have to do that. And I always wanted to be perfect. I always wanted to be the example, the ideal. So I definitely dieted. I was very into making sure I looked the best I could possibly be. I was always thin too growing up. There was not a time where I ever felt shamed for my body. Like no one ever shamed me at all. But it didn't really matter because I did. I always found something wrong with it. And I think too, I had several friends who were dancers as well, and every single one of them walked away with an eating disorder. We all did. So I think it was just something that was a part of growing up. I'm still a little bit of a control freak. I like having my schedule. I like having my routine. And that's why travel was so good for me, is because it took all the planning. Best laid plans always failed when I was traveling. The control of what I was going to eat, how I was going to eat it, what time of day I was going to eat, that was all taken out for me. I couldn't go to the store and choose, my total low calorie food in Italy. That just doesn't really exist. No carb diet does not exist in Italy. And so I really did. It changed my whole perspective again about life and what was important, and saying, I don't look like the people from a magazine, and that's completely fine because most people don't. And that has been a constant reminder when I travel, because you go all around the world and you see different body types, you see different standards. You go to Japan and they are a whole new level of thin, and then you go to Brazil and it's a totally different idea of what beauty is there. And what I kind of learned is just that expectation is arbitrary. It depends on how you grew up. It depends on society's expectations of who you are. And so travel really opened my mind to what body positivity could be, how I could look at myself and say, hey, I'm perfectly fine the way I am, and the sooner I accept that, the better my life is going to be. So I still struggle with it. I think, an eating disorder, any sort of mental illness, you don't get over it. It's something that you're constantly working through. Even now, with everything going on, I can't get some of the ingredients I would normally eat, some of the foods I would normally eat because of everything that's occurring right now. And just accepting that and saying, okay, if I gain some weight, if I gain a few pounds during this, I'm not going to come out worse. I'm not sick. I'm fine. Things are going to be okay. And so I think travel, it just really put my priorities in check. It was the priority of being like, am I safe? Do I have a place to stay? Maslow's hierarchy of needs kind of thing, saying, okay, what are my basic needs? Have I met that? Great. And that was enough. I didn't need to say, oh man, how much weight have I lost? Or, because that wasn't a priority.
So I'm fascinated a bit about the eating disorder journey in terms of how old were you when you started to realize that this was a thing for you?
Oh, really young. I would say probably 13 is about, when I kind of, and again, I was tiny, and I'm only 5'2", American metrics. So I'm pretty short, and I was always very small, like a very small person. And even then, I found myself questioning and saying, oh man, if I could only lose 5 more pounds, how would that look? How would that. And then I wouldn't say that I really felt in control of my eating and my eating habits till probably around 23 or 24.
Wow, so it was over 10 years.
Yes, yep.
Right. And you said, you made reference earlier that because you were doing ballet and it seemed to be a thing within the ballet community that other girls were also going through this as well.
Definitely. I had a really good friend, and we kind of served as support for each other for a long time. And she was, again, beautiful, beautiful girl, still is beautiful, beautiful girl. And, shouldn't have any worries about whether she appears attractive or not. That wasn't really the issue, I think, especially for me. I can't really speak for everyone, but it wasn't even so much whether I felt attractive or not. It was whether I was controlling myself in the way that I felt appropriate. And I think, I've loosened up a lot in my old age of 28. But yeah, I think getting older too definitely helps that, because you start to realize there are a lot more important matters than how you look. And, even having so much control, because by then, you've noticed that your plans have failed to some extent. So.
Well, thank you very much for sharing that piece of your life journey, because I'm sure there's people listening today who are struggling, and particularly during this time that we're in now, because it's thrown chaos into a lot of different areas of people's lives. And if you are suffering through those things, then get on a plane as soon as we can travel and get out there and be spontaneous, because it can help you change your life. Right, Alex?
I completely agree.
Now, freelance writing. Let's change gears and go down this path. You got into freelance writing. Obviously, I know why, because it was a passion, but when did all this happen for you?
This happened the second time I moved to Italy, actually.
You went back again.
I did. I graduated college, and after doing my European tour, I came back to Montana and I said, I don't think I'm going to stay here. So I booked a flight, one-way flight to Italy again, and I said, okay, I'm going to try this again and see if I can, teach English. That was going to be my goal. I found out I hated it. I was not really good at it. I loved the students. I loved them. They were fantastic. And I loved getting to interact with them, but I hated being a teacher.
Right.
Which is so funny too, because now, I do teach in different ways. I have an online course coming out, and I got my master's in creative writing so I could teach. And so I do love teaching. I think it was just the very specific kind of teaching that we were doing. But anyway, I hated it. And I, as soon as I got my certificate to teach, I was like, this is not going to work for me. I'm not doing it. And so I kind of started looking into other options and saying, I know travel writing is a thing. I wonder if that's a possibility, if that's something I can do. So I sat around in my apartment in Florence, because I was living in Florence then, and started applying to a whole bunch of freelance writing positions. And I was really lucky where they happened to have a spot open for a foreign correspondent for USA Today. And yeah, so I was really lucky. I was definitely the youngest person on staff, which was great because a lot of what they needed was me to go to different clubs and check out the clubs. And I was, at that point I'm like, 22 years old. So that seemed fantastic to me. I was so excited. Now you could not pay me enough money to do that, but I loved it. It was great. And I could try different restaurants and, even occasionally get, some hotel stays. And so it was a great introduction into travel writing and blogging. And so, I really lucked out on that.
So for people listening today who are not familiar with the US newspaper publications, USA Today is a US newspaper, and wow, Alex scored a really good gig in Florence in Italy, being a foreign correspondent at such a young age. That's fantastic.
It was really kind of a dream come true. It was kind of a dream job for me, and I lived in Italy 2 more years after that, and I did that for 2 years. And then at some point, I went back to New York, and I connected with an old friend who we went to college together, and I always kind of had a crush on him, and turns out he always kind of had a crush on me too, which who knew? And yeah, and then so it was I kind of either had to move to New York or it wouldn't have worked out. So that's...
So that was travel for another reason.
Yeah, yes. And a lot of our relationship has been completely built on travel, where he came to visit me in Italy, and then we met up in Prague one time, and he had loved to travel too. He had studied abroad in England, and so we both had that from the very beginning, that love of travel.
It's a global travel love story.
Yes, it's funny because I see on Instagram people posting all the time of, I'm in this long distance relationship, and I always comment and say, you know what? It can work. I promise you.
Absolutely.
Yes, it can work.
Now, you've traveled to more than 50 countries around the world, so I thought we could have a little bit of fun with that in a way that we explore some of those places with you. So I've come up with a bit of a game that we can play. And the game is called In Which Country? Okay, so I'm going to ask you a whole series of questions about what happened in which country. And there's going to be one rule for the game, and the one rule is you can't answer the United States of America to any of these questions.
That seems fair.
Is that okay?
I'm down.
Right, so let's get going. Which country have you been to that you felt the most connected to spiritually?
Oh, that's so hard. Um, I really love Vietnam. Um,
Mm.
I would say, I don't know. Oh, that's so hard. Yeah, and even South Korea too. I did a temple stay in South
Yeah.
Korea, and it was so beautiful. It was in a national park, and it was really a special moment too. I went with a friend, and we went and we meditated for 2 days, and I had never really meditated before either.
Mm.
So we kind of needed to stay still for 2 days, and I was surprised how much I liked it. And
Wow. I was going to say very difficult for a Leo to stay still
oh,
for
it
2 days.
was. I'm horrible. I'm so antsy, and but I kind of loved it. It was really nice, and it was really because I've always kind of been a space cadet to begin with,
Mm.
so I think it was a chance for me to just kind of bring that in and just relax and kind of just say you don't have to be anywhere, you don't have to do anything, but just sit here right now,
Mm.
and that was a really nice feeling. So I would say, yeah, maybe South Korea. That would probably be.
I think we better go with South Korea, yeah,
Yeah.
because it
So,
sounds like there was a bit of change going on there.
Definitely.
Okay, for the rest of these, we've got to take your. I'm putting a new rule into the game. Okay, so the new rule is we're going to go with your first
so
answer. You've
Okay.
got to be spontaneous on this. Okay,
Oof,
so
okay.
and you're not allowed to take more than 5 seconds to think about it.
All right, I'll just blurt it out.
I'm putting a lot of rules in here as we go. Now we're up to 3 rules. Okay,
I'm ready. I got this.
so okay, the next one is: in which country did you have the most amazing breakfast?
Ooh, ah. Oh, good question. I think we actually Indonesia, probably. I in
Oh
Bali.
yes. Mm.
Yes, yeah. Oh, the food, the fresh fruit there was just so good. And I had this like giant yogurt bowl because that's a thing I think in the digital nomad community there is like those smoothie bowls. So,
So are we talking about Bali?
yes.
Right. Okay. So I want to be specific. So when you give us the country, you go down to the next level and tell us the city or the experience you were
Mm.
having as well.
Okay.
so
So
Bali.
Bali, Indonesia was where you had the best breakfast you've ever had.
Yes, I would say so.
Okay.
Okay. Fantastic. In which country did you have the greatest wow scenery moment?
Definitely Nepal in the Himalayas.
Mm.
And it's if this is one I go back to all the time. It was a really special trip. Scenery was stunning, absolutely stunning. I grew up in Montana, and the mountains there are beautiful. It was nothing compared to what we saw there. It was just
Mm.
insane. It was otherworldly. And it was a special trip for me too because it was a 14-day hike. We hiked up to the Everest Base Camp,
Right.
and my husband and we had talked about it before, and we decided he wasn't my husband then. We we decided, okay, let's get engaged once we reach the top. And so we were kind of thinking about it the entire trip up and kind of building up to this moment. And once we got up there and we, proposed to each other, we were both sobbing. We were just crying. And so, in terms of scenery and everything, it was just a really emotional period for sure.
That hike up to Everest Base Camp is the real epitome of that saying, enjoy the journey as well as the destination, isn't it? Because you've got such spectacular scenery all the way, and then you come to the foot of the highest mountain in the world, basically, yeah?
Yeah, it's totally true. And you do, it's one step at a time, one day at a time for sure.
And you proposed to each other when you got there.
We did, yes,
Oh,
and we were so lucky because we actually had a someone on our trip who was a wedding photographer,
oh,
and yeah, which was great. And weirdly enough, she was from Montana,
oh,
so who knew? So yeah, she took some amazing pictures, and it was just a really special moment.
sounds like you two had pretty much your whole Harry Met Sally episode.
So,
Pretty much.
Now, my next question you probably already answered now, because it is, in which country did you reach the highest altitude that you've been to in your life?
Oh, you know what? Actually, it was in Bolivia.
Ah, okay, good.
Yep, we were in La Paz for a few days before we went to the Salt Flats.
Yep.
And yeah, the altitude there is crazy. It's absolutely crazy. So, and honestly, altitude doesn't really bother me that much because of growing up in a higher altitude. But it's definitely hard on some people I've traveled with.
I'll tell you what, your experience as a ballerina would have helped you there as well.
That's a good point.
Yep, it definitely would have. Okay, so it's La Paz in... Yes, how high is it though? Is it higher than Everest Base Camp?
I think it is. Yeah.
I'm gonna have to fact check that because I think it might be pretty close, you know.
Please do, because you might be totally right. So...
Okay, in which country did you have your most frightening encounter, and what was it?
Oh, good one. Oh, I think in Japan, actually, which sounds weird, but I almost wasn't able to fly back to Italy. And I thought I was going to be stuck in Japan, and I was very broke and really concerned because I needed to get back to Italy for my job, but they didn't have I hadn't booked my return flight from Italy to the United States yet, and I showed them I work in Italy, here's my work visa, blah blah blah, but they didn't believe me. And they were just wanted to make very sure that I was going to be in the place I was supposed to be. And so yeah, I was just sitting there and I'm sweating, I'm really sweating. And, my first reaction when these things happen is always to not really get angry, but a little bit, kind of a little irritated. But I knew that would not go over well with the people who I was talking with. So I have to be honest, I kind of started crying, and they immediately let me on after that. It was so cute. They were so upset. They're like, "Oh, don't cry. It's gonna be okay. We'll get you on the plane." But
seems to be a trend. If it's not in your parents' kitchen before you go overseas, it's
in
Japan, yeah?
Oh, yeah. And, I called my parents after, and I said, I think I cried. And, the thing is, I don't cry very often, but it's always like some big event where I'm scared, probably, when I start crying, I guess. That seems to be the theme.
Okay, cool. Okay, next one is, in which country would you move to tomorrow to live?
I loved Australia. I love Melbourne. Melbourne was a great city. It reminded me a lot of if you took the gross rats and stuff out of New York. Like the slices of pizza on the street for no reason, and all the trash, and you made it very clean, and more coffee shops. But I really like Melbourne.
So it's a place you could live.
Yeah, definitely. It seems like a super livable city.
Okay, cool. Next one. In which country did you have the most amazing dinner experience?
I'm gonna say Italy.
Yeah, I
don't. For sure. It never ends. It was so funny. I remember this one time, I was going to fly back to Spain because my husband and I were living in Spain at that time, and I was by myself because he and his brother were traipsing around Spain, and I was gonna go meet my mom, and we were gonna do the Camino de Santiago together. But I had a few days in Rome by myself, and so I went to this restaurant, and it was amazing, and I loved how I could order in Italian, and it was fantastic. It was the best meal ever. But what was so funny is I sat down next to these two, I think they were twins, twin boys. They were, well, I don't want to say boys, they were teenagers, and I think they had been studying abroad in Rome as well, and I started kind of just talking to them, and it turns out they were from Montana. So I thought I was on this whole other side of the world and that I wouldn't know anyone, and turns out we had some mutual friends and everything. It was kind of weird, but
I just want to let all my listeners know at this stage that when you go and visit Montana, there'll be no one there because they're all out traveling the world.
I think that's true. I know so many Montanans who, one of my, she was a close friend when I was growing up, is a travel photographer, and she travels all over the place, and so it's fun to keep up with her and see what she's up to.
Cool. Next question. In which country did you have your best airport experience?
Of course, Singapore. I think, yeah, that the airport in Singapore, we got there early because we had heard such good things. And yeah, the butterfly garden and these waterfalls and like places you could lie down if you were tired and you didn't have to pay for a lounge or anything. It was pretty amazing. So
It is a good place, yeah. Okay, moving on. In which country did you meet someone that you still talk with to this very day?
Oh, it's really fun. I had a friend in Greece, and I met her through another friend who I was living with at the time in Florence, and her name was Helen, and she was amazing. We met, and she took time off work to take us around her town and Thessaloniki, and we went to a beach. We went to her favorite food spots, and she was just an amazing, beautiful person. And we still keep in touch, and I have a book club that I have each month with my followers and my audience, and she was one of the first to sign up, and I'm so excited. So it's just, yeah, really lovely, smart, wonderful person.
Well, shout out to Helen, and you're going to have to send her a copy of this podcast.
Oh, absolutely. She's fantastic. So hi, Helen. Good to pimp you. Yeah.
Okay, next question. In which country do you wish you were born outside of the United States?
Wow. I always said France growing up as I think there's just something about the lifestyle, the history. There's just so much. France is amazing.
Okay, we'll put France down as the place.
We'll put France, yeah.
Yeah. And we'll call you Alexandria next time around.
There we go. Perfect. Perfect.
Okay, next question. In which country... You're doing pretty well at this game. Are you enjoying it?
Oh, yeah. You're making me think, though. I haven't thought about these things.
In which country did you visit that you wished you knew the language?
I would say South Korea, actually. I took some Korean lessons, and I think that was one of the first countries that I went to where there was absolutely no English at all. Japan was probably the closest, but South Korea was a big one where, I know some French, I know some Italian, I know some Spanish, but I had no idea what people were saying. And I actually ended up taking a few Korean lessons while we were there just because I was astounded. No signs were in English or anything. So it was just fascinating. I loved it.
Couple of tips I can give you about South Korea. You can go up to anybody and say, "Hello, Mrs. Park" or "Mr. Park," and you'll probably be right.
That's true.
And if you order a beer and kimchi, you'll be everybody's friend.
That's a great point.
Tips on South Korea, people, next time you go there. Okay, next question. In which country did you do something that was nearly illegal?
Oh, well, I don't want to say I've done illegal things in countries, but I definitely have. That's part of traveling so young, I think, is you're like, the rules don't apply to me. I'm definitely in Italy for sure. I slept in places I wasn't supposed to just because, I missed the last train when I was out partying or something. I think I actually slept on a train once that wasn't moving. I went,
Right.
yeah, it was empty, and I just said, hey, I'd rather sleep here than in the train station.
I've done that, and it was one of the best night's sleep I've ever had.
Hey, it's so quiet. You have it totally to
It is.
yourself. It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, next one. In which country where the experience changed your life the most?
Again, I would say Italy. Yeah.
Italy, yeah.
Yeah, I would say that just because it did. It just launched my whole love of travel, and it launched my whole desire to see the world.
Okay.
In which country did you have your scariest transportation experience?
I don't know if this was necessarily the scariest, but in Egypt, we were taking the train from Luxor to Cairo, and the air conditioning was broken, and it was broken in the way where it was on instead. And you wouldn't think you would freeze in Egypt, but we were freezing. We were freezing for 13 hours.
Oh.
So it was a little bit scary because I thought we could die of hypothermia for sure. But yeah, definitely that for sure.
Okay, I'll put scariest in brackets uncomfortable.
There we go.
Experience.
Perfect.
Yeah. In which country do you like writing about the most?
I think I always go back to Spain. I loved it. We were there 6 months, and it was my first opportunity really to live with my boyfriend, now husband, where it was just the two of us, and I think that was a really defining moment in our relationship for sure. But beyond that, I love the food. I love the history. I'd say, I know I'm not supposed to answer twice, but I'd say England as well. I love writing about England too.
Okay, we'll put Spain in capital letters and we'll put England in little small text underneath.
You got it.
In which country did you take your favorite travel photograph?
Oh, Morocco. No question.
You didn't hesitate there.
Oh, no. Morocco is my favorite place to take photos of.
So were you sitting on a donkey on the Atlas Mountains or what?
I wish. That sounds fun. It was actually in the...
Have you done that though? Seriously?
Yeah. No, I mean, maybe not a donkey. We did. I've ridden a camel many a time.
But you've been to the Atlas Mountains?
Yes, I love them.
Aren't they beautiful? Spectacular.
But yes, no, I was actually in the Sahara Desert, and we had this guide who, he looked like he could have been a male model for or he could have been Aladdin or something, he was
Right.
And I got him at this moment where he was just pausing and looking over the desert, and I took his picture, and I still love it. It's my favorite picture I've ever taken, and it was actually pretty early on when I got into photography, so... But yes, definitely Morocco.
Where can my listeners see this photograph? Is it online somewhere?
Oh, you know what? I'm probably going to post it on Instagram pretty soon. It's one...
Yeah, let's do that. And then hashtag Global Travel Channel.
You got it. I love that.
So people can check it out. That's cool. Okay, in which country did you lose something precious?
Oh, I mean, I lost my sanity in multiple places, but that's pretty important.
I've asked this on the basis that, when we travel a lot, we typically lose something that's really meaningful to us somewhere along the line.
Oh, yeah, I always do. I've lost so many things. Bolivia was the most recent one, I would say. I lost my cell phone. And it actually ended up being wonderful because I really got to focus on traveling, and I wasn't on social media all the time and taking, pictures and things like that, which are, I had a camera, could totally use that. That's totally fine. So losing a cell phone was actually a great thing. I really enjoyed it. And it was on our honeymoon too, so it was fantastic. But
yeah, I was going to say that was a blessing in disguise.
it really was. It was great. And, Daniel had his, so he, any GPS or anything, we were totally fine. So it was really nice.
Okay, great. Next one. In which country did you get lost?
Pretty much all of them. Definitely it's helped having a GPS. I remember we got really lost, again, in Morocco. We were in Marrakesh. And we were just wandering around, and you can't wander around in Morocco. That's not a great course of action. So yes, I remember being lost for hours, and we had to go to, I think, 5 or 6 different hotels and ask them which way to go. And, eventually we got there, but it took way longer than it should have.
In which country have you had the most fun when you've been traveling?
Oh, man. I have fun wherever we go. I love South Korea. I just think it's such an interesting culture, and the party culture is pretty hard too. So,
oh yeah, they're hardcore.
If we're talking about that kind of fun, then yeah, that was a good one for sure.
South Korea wins again. Okay, in which country is your favorite hotel?
Oh, I think would be Morocco. I love riads. I think they're a fantastic way to get to know the culture of Morocco, and then also they're just beautiful. You know, they're absolutely stunning, just the architecture and everything.
Yeah, okay, cool. We've only got a few left, so you're nearly there. You're doing extremely well, I might add. In which country did you watch the most amazing sunset?
Yeah, I'd say probably Greece. Greece has, you know, and then Santorini's so famous for the sunsets and everything. But I remember we were in Paros, which is a little bit smaller island, and yeah, the sunset was just absolutely gorgeous.
Okay, good. Next one. In which country did the animals scare you the most?
You know, I'm really not that scared of animals. That's, you know, I ate one, like a spider in Cambodia.
Have you been chased by one?
Yeah, no, you're totally right. Okay, Nepal. Thanks for helping me out there. Yes, I was charged by a rhino in Nepal. We were on safari and we hadn't seen anything all day. Our guide was pointing out spiders. You know, he was like, look at this big spider. That one's even bigger. And we were like, great, this is fantastic. And then out of nowhere came this giant male rhino just coming at us. And they can't see very well, so they don't really know that they're charging you. And it was that, you're right, that was totally terrifying. I was like, okay, I'm done, like, we're done. And you know, at the very last moment he kind of veered off because we made some noise. But yeah, no, you're you're right, that was the scariest encounter for sure.
It's a bit scarier than a spider.
Yeah, you're right, even though spiders do kind of freak me out a little bit, just a little.
So we've got 3 questions left in our little game today. In which country did you swear you would return to one day?
France, actually. France. And I have been back many times, I think 4 times now, and I would go again in a heartbeat. But I remember being in Paris and just saying, this is not the last time. I will be back. And I have been, and I love it, and we'll go back again.
Have you been to Annecy?
I haven't.
Okay, put it on your list because it's something very, very special, and a girl from Montana will love Annecy, that's for sure. So it's in the southeast. It's about 35 minutes drive over the French border from Geneva in Switzerland. And it is a lakeside town that's got the most magnificent food and scenery, and it's just a absolutely beautiful part of the world.
That sounds wonderful.
So if you find yourself in that area, it's not too far from Lyon and Grenoble and places like that.
Perfect.
So
it's on the list now.
And if you're going, let me know, because I've got some friends there that'll take care of you.
Oh, well, thank you. Now I have to go.
Okay, 2 last questions. And I want you to be honest about this one. In which country did you feel the most disappointed?
You know, actually, as amazing as the breakfast was, I felt disappointed by Bali in Indonesia. And we were there a month and lived there, really. And I don't know. I love the people. The people were great. I was not a big fan of the food, unless, you know, I don't know. I just, for some reason, it didn't connect.
When you say the people, are you talking about the locals
Yes.
or all of the imports that are there?
No, the locals. I think that's why it was. And, you know, I've been a digital nomad before, so I know that feeling of moving around from place to place and, you know, creating community and things like that. But for some reason, you know, I was not interested in the community there. And no offense to anyone who lives in Bali, but just was not, you know, the locals were fantastic. I really enjoyed getting to know them. But I think it is kind of hard to find the real Bali and to find that real sense of wonder in that. So I don't know if I totally found it, and that might be on me.
Thank you for a very honest answer on that one. That's good. Okay, the last question in the game today is, in which country would you like to move to tomorrow?
You know, we've talked about Italy. My husband and I both love Italy. We really do. And we were kind of talking, we're like, well, maybe we need a break from New York when this is all over. Maybe we need to kind of look at moving there. And I think, if I could have a second house somewhere, it would be Italy for sure.
Yeah, under the Tuscan sun.
Yes, definitely. Absolutely.
I could see you there writing away each day on your terrace.
Don't put that image in my head because I'll never get there. But yeah, we love it. Both of us do, and I think that's where we go.
Thank you so much for playing the game, being good sport today. You were fantastic. I'd like to really wrap up by asking you a couple of last questions, I guess. And the first one is, what have all of these travel experiences meant to you and your outlook on the world today?
I think what they've meant the most to me is realizing how small I am and how unconsequential, I guess. I'm just one person and the world is so big. There are so many people. I think that is really the biggest lesson it's taught me, is that other people are going through struggles on a day-to-day basis. They're going through their own issues, and those issues are equally as important to them as my issues have ever been to me. So I think that was a wonderful lesson travel taught me, and the biggest one I try to continue to implement in my life on a day-to-day.
Beautiful. If you weren't doing what you do today, what would you be doing, do you think?
I don't know. That's a good question. I'm kind of doing what I love, which is great. It's fantastic. I love singing, and I play several different instruments. So I wouldn't really want to be a musician, though. I don't know. Maybe that would be like second choice, but first choice is good. I'm happy with it.
So what does life look like going forward for digital nomads, do you think?
I think it's going to be interesting. I think there's a great possibility that there will be an influx of them once this is all over, because remote work has become more of the norm. And I think it does open up a lot of possibilities for those who were thinking about it before. They can now tout the fact that they've had remote work experience when applying for jobs. So if they're applying for something more full-time, then that's definitely something to look forward to. I also think a lot of people will be looking to save money as well, so they might look to moving to places that are more affordable. So I think that's a possibility as well. I think there is a good chance that it will increase, and for both good and for bad. I think there's upsides and downsides to both of those things. So
yeah, well, watch this space, I guess. Yeah, and we'll see how it all unfolds.
Yeah, absolutely. And I could be totally wrong, which that'd be great too. But yeah, I think that it will kind of open up some places that maybe haven't been opened up before.
Yeah, let's hope so. Alex, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the Global Travel Channel podcast show today. I hope you've enjoyed your experience with me, and I would like to also send a huge shout out to Robert and Mallory and wish them all the very best for their upcoming wedding. And I'd love to have you back on the show sometime and we can talk more about travel.
I would absolutely love that. Thank you so much, Mark.
Okay, stay well in New York, and we will speak again soon. Alex Schnee was my guest today on the Global Travel Channel podcast show, talking to me from New York City. And isn't it great when you get somebody to reflect on their travels over the years and what are some of the situations that mean the most to them? We should all probably reflect a little bit more on all the great memories we've had of our travel experiences. And maybe we could play a little game in amongst our family of asking each other questions about our favourite things that happened to us while we were traveling in different parts of the world. If you're looking for different episodes from the Global Travel Channel podcast, all you have to do is go over to our website at www.globaltravelchannel.com. There you will find over 140 episodes to listen to, some amazing guests that have incredible travel adventures to share with you. If you want to download the podcast, you can simply do that by going to places like Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Castbox, Google Play, host of other locations. They're all listed there on the website. And I would really appreciate it if you love our content to give it a shout out to somebody else. Tell a friend, a family member, or even a work colleague or a complete stranger on the street when you go walking past them. Just ask them if they listen to the Global Travel Channel podcast. Wouldn't that be something? Anyway, I would appreciate you helping us out any way you possibly can. Well, that's it for this episode. I'll be back soon with another episode from the Global Travel Channel. My name is Mark Philpott, and until we meet again next time, I wish you all a very happy week ahead.